Anyway, like I said, Dr. Boyle, what grade would you give us on that in terms of how we're doing?
It's not a very high grade, I have to say. Although I think again the images that we saw earlier, while they did stop at 8 Mile or downriver or at the Alter Road, it's there are connections that take us out. And I do think that, curiously enough, cycling and the connections of trails might be one example of how we can break the barriers that we've got. There's a way of connecting across there that I think is easier than having to try and get the big 4 or 5 and get them out of Mackinac $2,000 a shot to try and get people to talk. I want to change the way in which we have that regional discussion. And I think, again, cycling could be part of it. But it is very difficult, and we're making extremely slow progress. Wearing another hat, the attempts to connect the communities of Troy and Birmingham with ARA money, the federal stimulus money, $9 million on the table to get us an improved multi-use transit sector, including a little bit of rail money, has foundered on the rocks of legal constraints and prices of land, and progress is not being made on that little example. Hopefully Dearborn will go better, and hopefully with this recent announcement by Mr. LaHood, we'll get a little bit of money for improving the high-speed trail over to Chicago. Little steps.
And on the issue of improving urban density, I do know that the University Cultural Center Association has really kind of initiated the Live in Midtown program, which Wayne State University, along with DMC and the Henry Ford Health Systems, are participating in and trying to get more people to live in and around Midtown. Are there any other things that WSU is involved in to promote urban density that maybe we don't know about, that we should know about? If so, this is a great opportunity to let us know.
Indeed. How long have I got? For a while. I think there are several areas in Detroit that are incredibly important to the future of the city. Southwest Detroit is clearly one of them. The river and Jefferson corridor is vital. The downtown itself is where the action is. But amongst all of these, clearly the clustering of activities around the anchors in Midtown are important. And a lot of that is about increasing density and connecting, again, the same idea, connecting the 3 institutions and connecting that to the neighborhoods around here. Midtown Detroit Inc., Detroit Midtown Inc., Midtown Detroit Inc., the new name for the organization that Sue and others are moving forward with, I think has got this densification front and center. And Live Midtown is a subsidy that goes to those who work in the 3 institutions, Henry Ford, DMC, Vanguard, and Wayne State, to encourage not just purchasing of homes, but also rental. This is a subsidy supported kindly by a cluster of the foundations. And that in itself is going to support the property market and allow people to live here in a subsidized way, which will stimulate the market and get more happening in this area. That's one thing. The other idea, as you mentioned before, or Scott mentioned before, was the improvements to Anthony Wayne Drive. It's taken a while. It's been very disruptive to people, and more people have complained about that than anything I can remember. But at the end of the day, there was on a diet, to use the phrase, and there's more parking on the street, and I think it will genuinely improve Anthony Wayne Drive, which was a racetrack. I used to look at the buses coming over the freeway and thundering down Anthony Wayne Drive 50 miles an hour, and I'm thinking, slow down. So they'll have to slow down, and that is good. And that adds to the sense of dynamism and the density in the streets, complete streets, is part of what we're doing at Wayne State University.
Well, I tell you personally, I love riding down that hill. So, all right, our next presenter is Carolyn Helmke. Am I saying the name right? Who I don't know a whole lot about, but I know you're from Chicago. Hopefully the weather's better there than it has been here lately. And she's a transportation consultant. So, Carol, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I've been thinking a lot the last few weeks about how, to me, it seems like our world is changing more than ever and faster than ever. I've never felt such a sense of how quickly the world is changing. And in one way in which that's reflected for me is what's happening in the Middle East. The Arab Spring, these countries, things are just changing at a level that certainly our leaders who spend all their time researching this stuff didn't predict. And it's going to really affect our lives. And we don't, you know, we can very easily say, well, gas prices, that's one thing. But it may come down to energy supply and then, you know, issues such as nationalization, things we haven't thought of for a long time. It's just it's a changing world. I don't think we know at this point how it's going to affect us, but I believe very strongly it's going to. Another way in which our world is changing, it's so fast I can't keep up with it, and I try very hard, is communications. We all know that we used to kind of have a landline in our house, and people may knock on your door and ask you something, or maybe they write you a letter, and that's just gone. You can text people, you can call them, people have several phone lines. I don't even get emails anymore. People send me emails through Facebook. You know, it's just a really different, quickly changing way of communicating, and I think it's set up kind of a system whereby everybody's communicating differently with everybody else, and some people are getting left out of that because they're not on Facebook, or they still have a landline and they wonder why no one's calling them. And if someone does call them, half the people don't pick up. I mean, I've noticed this phenomenon where people don't seem to answer their phones anymore, including myself. And it's just, we don't know where that's going to go. I mean, I really still don't think we know exactly how communication is going to level out, if it is going to level out so that everybody's more or less on the same page. Another area in which things have changed so much in the last few years is in this whole question of our communities and homeownership. If I did 4 or 5 years ago tried to buy a loan anywhere in the United States with you know, some job I might get at the 7-Eleven, I would have gotten a loan immediately in a house for a $300,000 house, and it would have been very simple. Now, it's the complete opposite, and it's very hard for someone who doesn't have 3 months of paychecks and a 25% down payment, etc., to get a house. So what that's left us with is a situation where there's all this housing stock that the banks are owning that no one can buy, so there's very little mobility. And that's going, I think that's changing, but so slowly, and that's where this group and we all come in, this is the big opportunity. The housing situation is not going to change this year, next year, or in 3 years. That buys so much time to look at this community and say, where do we want to be? How do we want to position ourselves so that we have the best house, the best property values, and I hate to reduce it to that, but let's just face it, it's a fact. And the best ways to get around, and that we feel like our kids are safe to run down to the neighbor's house and text them instead of knocking on the door, and so forth, versus you know, what we currently have where people are sort of locked in. I really think that the more we can look at our community and say, how do we want it to look, and we have some power over this, because there's developers aren't out there. People aren't trying to, you know, develop new sets of properties in the same way they used to. So there's an opportunity for people in the community to say, this is how I want my neighborhood to look. And these are the kind of people I want to attract. Other people who want to walk, bike, you know, use transit and drive when it works for them, or if they have a disability, or if they just feel like driving. But that it's more kind of for everybody, and it's easy to get around in all the ways that are possible. Kind of everything everybody's talked about today. I have this kind of idea that in 10 or 15 years, you guys will be at a party or something, and you'll meet someone you say, hey, where are you from? And I'm home from Detroit. And like, oh, wow, so am I. And you say, where do you live? And it turns out they just moved here a year ago. But they want to act like they've been from Detroit this whole time, because that's what's really cool. And you guys are going to be the really cool people who are here doing all the transition, who built it to be more of a, you know, a place people can walk and bike and hang out with their kids in the park and run into neighbors. I mean, a byproduct that I feel like is so underrated about being outside and walking and biking is how much you run into people and have a quick conversation, and you say hello, how are you doing, how are your kids, great, great, see you later kind of thing. That's a high quality of life to me, when you see your neighbors and you know them, versus you leave a bunch of messages, they don't call you back because they don't feel like it, or they never check their messages so they never got it, or whatever it is. But I just think Detroit is so well positioned, the full Detroit metro area, to be that community that you all want to live in, that you're going to feel really good about, but other people want to come live here too and raise your property values, and they're going to be bragging about it and about how they lived here the whole time, and you're going to be able to smile at them and say, well, actually you didn't, but you know what, have another, you know, cookie or whatever. So that's kind of what I see. I don't know, I'm trying to think more big picture than all the little minutia of what's changed in our field so much around different kinds of transit.